Everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Agency Arms Agency Optic System. Right up front, for full disclosure, I'm a sponsored shooter by Agency Arms, and because of that, this will not be a review video. So you're not watching a review of the AOS. You're watching an informational video on the AOS, my personal feelings about it, as well as the general specifications without getting into a subjective or objective review process, because I feel like it's a conflict of interest to review a product from a company I'm sponsored by. It's not something I'm going to do. So with that being said, let's talk about why the AOS is awesome. Let's face it, most of the OEM optic mounting systems for handguns out there are not that great. They're timid. They are conservative attempts by the manufacturers to cater to what they may have seen at one time as a niche market, although it is definitely exploding because the way of the future for handgun shooting is red dot sights. But companies are slow to mobilize. The larger the company, the slower and the more conservative they usually are with new attempts at doing new things. And I'm sure right now you have in your head a couple of those attempts that are out there. If that wasn't true, then the aftermarket options, the aftermarket industry for a modification of slides on handguns would not be as large as it is, and it would not have grown at such a geometric rate. That being said, modularity, a system that allows you to change optics, not just because, say, you bought a Vortex and you decided to move on to a Delta Point, or you bought a Delta Point and decided to move on to a Shield, or any combination thereof, but maybe you bought X optic and 5 years later the newest, latest, and greatest optic is out and your slide is milled for that specific optic and they don't share the same footprint. So now you either have to buy a new slide or you have to go with a modular system that's offered from an OEM manufacturer, because when it comes to the aftermarket options for modular optic mounting systems, there aren't very many choices out there. Well, now there's one more, and that's the Agency Optic System. At time of release, the AOS is offered for the Trijicon RMR, Loophole Delta Point Pro, Vortex Viper, and the Shield Optics RMS. Those are four choices that you have for optics, and each one of those optics can be used in an irons rear, or, my personal favorite, an irons forward configuration. You just buy the specific plate for the position in which you want your irons in, which is pretty cool. I've got to admit, that was definitely when we started, when I was first kind of read into the program when they're developing the system. That was one of the things that immediately struck me as very cool, because generally you've got to dedicate yourself to one or the other on a milled slide, and when it comes to the majority, I think almost all of the OEM offerings when it comes to modular optic systems, irons rear or no irons at all is pretty much the only thing you're going to get from one of the major manufacturers. Another added benefit of the AOS is those plates are steel. They're not aluminum. Steel is stronger, which means steel can be thinner if it wants to be. When they developed the AOS, they wanted to make sure it stayed on the gun. So you've got a locking lug, or a boss, if you will, or a tab and taper, or tab and insert. There's a bunch of different ways you can say it. And you've got 3 hard points for screw sets. So that's 3 points of contact with a screw, plus a boss or recoil lug, if you will, that the plate slides into the rear of the frame, or I should say the slide, and then you mount your optic to that. Because the optic is mounted directly to the plate, the options for, well, future optics that may come to market is pretty much unrestricted, as long as the optic wouldn't extend upon the generally accepted size for a miniaturized red dot sight. You know what else is cool about the AOS? The depth, the mounting depth, how deep your optic is going to sit in the slide. If you take the AOS without an optic on it, any one of the plates, and you compare it to the milled depth of an Agency Arms plate, you'll find that they're within 1/1000th of an inch, or maybe a little less, maybe a little more, the exact same depth. So I'm getting the same depth of a milled optic on a modular plate system, which is something no OEM offers. It's just not something that's going to be done. A lot of the OEM plates that I've seen, not all of them, but most of them are cast or MEM, so they sit a little higher and they have their own fragility and shearing issues. With the AOS, I've got those 3 hard set screw points of contact, I've got that rear recoil lug, and then I've got the actual spine and the milling of the slide itself. Despite all those enhancements to make sure that the plate is secure as possible during long-term use, I don't have to worry about my optics sitting higher than it should. For some people, they use, like a Baylor or a Duke Defense. There's nothing wrong with either of those mounts, but they sit the optic really high, in my opinion, higher than I would like. Glock MOS, nothing wrong with it. relatively speaking. But if you throw a Delta Point Pro on it, it's going to sit pretty high. And especially with the Delta Point, it having one of the taller footprints out there for an MRDS, I wanted to get as low into the gun as possible, and that's something I'm not going to get from some of those other systems. Plates being steel versus something like the MOS using like a MIM or a cast plate, and only 2 screw points of contact and that thin spine for your I guess horizontal locking. It doesn't give me a lot of confidence long term. The MOS is a reasonable attempt, but it's not the best thing out there because it was conservative in its application and didn't take the hard use that some people put their guns through into mind.
Another feature of the Agency Arms AOS is the fact that existing platforms such as the Glock MOS can be converted to the AOS. You can send in your Glock slide, they'll convert it to the AOS system. You'll be able to use all the AOS plates, which is very beneficial for people who bought an MOS and discovered some of its design problems with reliability when it comes to more hard use of optics. For some people the MOS is going to be fine, and for those people they wouldn't need the Glock MOS to begin with. But if you made a law enforcement officer's individual purchase and you found that your MOS wasn't really holding up as well as you'd like it to, the AOS is an option for you, and it's going to get that optic a little bit deeper in the slide, which is something you probably want anyway. In addition to that, for agencies that are interested in switching over to optics or allowing officers to purchase approved platforms for optics, one of the problems has been that some agencies do not want to go with an aftermarket slide modification versus OEM because they're worried about warranty. And if they feel if they send in a Glock MOS or just a regular Glock to have it milled by an aftermarket company, it's going to void the warranty covered by Glock. Agency will honor the work done on a Glock slide, be it an MOS or a traditional Glock slide, to accept the AOS system to the same degree that it would be honored by Glock. So if you have any issues with your slide, Agency is going to take care of those to the same level that Glock would for repair or replacement, which should alleviate some of the administrative fears that some law enforcement agencies have when it comes to adopting modular optics platforms.
I've been using the AOS for months now. I had a prototype slide sent out to me for testing to make sure that it was going to be good, because Agency Arms wants to make sure that when they release something to the general public, it's not just something that an engineer thought was okay, it's something that shooters think was okay. So a lot of us Agency Arms shooters had the AOS slides for long-term testing. I beat the holy piss out of mine, and I was not able to create any significant issues. I wasn't able to create an optic shift. I wasn't able to break it, which is also very important. So they approved the final design. It went into production. It's available now on the Agency Arms website and through approved dealers. If you're looking for a slide that offers you the ability to change optics, not just because you're indecisive, but that could be it. Maybe it's a purpose-built reason, or because you want something that's going to be long-term. Because let's be honest, the slide should last much longer than the optic does. And if the newest, latest, and greatest thing comes along, like an optic you can control with your mind, that might be 30, 40, 3,000 years down the road, but if the AOS can definitely make a plate for it. And that's probably the single greatest feature over just the general engineering and design features that go into the AOS that make it advantageous over, well, everything else that's out there. I'm Eric Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.